Hi, I'm Linda.
And I'm Sarah. Are you ready?
Oh yeah, I'm ready. Let's get relational. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Let's Get Relational. Today, we're going to talk about yet another of our favorite topics, which is...
Listening.
What?
Listening.
Right, listening. And we really like this one because it's really changed a lot for us to be able to listen to each other and really pay attention to what the person meant to say, and have compassion rather than having reaction.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing for us that has worked really well in our relationship and our relationship with other people, is to not make assumptions about what the other person was trying to say, and to really give them the benefit of the doubt. And that's the thing that I think often we are so caught up in our response that we don't really pay attention to what the person really said or meant to say. And so often in so many relationships, all kinds of relationships, people have huge reactions and it's not what the person meant at all.
Yeah, and so they get upset, really upset about things, and then, they come at the other person. The other person is like, that's not at all what I meant. And so it's this whole, huge situation that ends up happening, and, conflict that happens, and, because one person is so upset by what the other person said, and the other person's like, I don't know why you're so angry at me, that's not what I meant at all.
Yeah.
And so that's a really uncomfortable situation to be in when there's that much misunderstanding going on, because some people can have really big reactions to things, and if they're interpreting what someone said as incredibly bad, then their reaction is gonna be large.
Yeah, I had a teacher once that taught me to have my response be neutral to most things, and that you want to not be super angry and not be super hurt, just have a neutral reaction and then figure out what's going on. But one of the important things is to pay attention to whether you're interrupting other people a lot or whether you're getting interrupted a lot. And we talked about this in another episode where, you can have that bantering thing, but suddenly one person wants to be heard more. And so that interrupting, bantering thing, because bantering and the interrupting kind of having fun, and everybody's talking at once and all that. And I grew up in a family like that. And my aunt used to raise her hand to get to have an opportunity to speak. And I think the thing that we have really noticed is to be able to give each other space to have a response and not to interrupt in the middle of it. And sometimes we're talking fast and loud, and we do that same kind of thing too. But if there's things where we really want to be heard, or we know the other person really wants to be heard, that there's really a concerted effort to make sure not to interrupt. And one of the things that I've said has helped me when she was in her teenage years is to actually sit with my hand on my face covering my mouth, and that just reminded me not to speak until she was complete with what she really needed to say. Because it's so easy, I think, particularly in relationships with certain kinds of people, might be romantic partners, it might be parent-child, and certainly in some friendships, it's so easy to feel hurt feelings or to think you know where it's going and try to finish the other person's sentence. And a lot of times people are not getting to fully express themselves. And that's such a beautiful thing, to allow people to fully express themselves. And some of us think through what it is we need to say by saying it out loud. Some people think it all through in their head and it comes out as if they'd rehearsed it. And some of us have to talk it out until we get to the place where we really feel like we have expressed what we really wanted to express.
Yeah. We both do the whole talking out thing. But I also sometimes think out in my head, but then parts of it will come out through speaking. So it's kind of funny. I'll have a weird inside my head, outside my head conversation with myself. But that's just because that's kind of how my brain works and how it's easiest for me to work through things. If there's some out loud expression and then quiet contemplating. So
yeah, exactly. So the number one thing is for you to pay attention to where you're interrupting other people and where you are getting interrupted, and to speak up for yourself. If you feel like you're getting interrupted all the time and nobody's ever letting you complete a thought, then ask for what you want, because other people might think you like the way it is just fine, and they have no idea. They're not tuned into your expressions. They're not tuned into your energy. They don't have any clue. And so you can't expect people to know something, to be a mind reader. So if you are in a relationship or with friends who are interrupting you all the time, ask for help. Say, you know what? I realize I'm feeling a little bit frustrated because I get interrupted a lot in my life. So I would like to practice how to have other people really listen to me. Will you help me with that? It's not that complicated. Yeah. Nothing we talk about here is rocket science. And what we're talking about here are certain behaviors that practiced over time increase the happiness in your relationships and the happiness inside yourself. Yeah. So the next thing is listening to understand and to really hear what the other person's saying and not to formulate your response.
Yes, as we just said, you know, it's important that while you're listening, you're not trying to figure out what you can respond to, like take a thing and like, oh, I can say something about that. But listening to really comprehend what they're saying, what they're feeling. So when you do, you know, because you are going to respond in some way, but in responding, that you're responding to what you've come to understand, not necessarily like what they've said, and bringing it like back to yourself to be like, oh, so you're feeling this, are you feeling this? Like more responding to question and make sure that you continue to understand is what I would say.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is when we do these podcasts, we do them unscripted. And so we make a list that we have on a whiteboard behind the camera that just tells us the few points we want to make. But while she's speaking, sometimes I find myself not listening as much as I could and thinking, well, what am I going to say after that? And
I do that too.
Yeah. So what I've really learned to do is just stay in the moment with it, and that I don't have to be perfect, number one.
Yeah. No.
And so my response doesn't have to even follow what she did. I can change the topic. I can go somewhere else. And so I'm really practicing, even in our relationship and even doing this work together, that staying in the moment and staying present and really hearing what you're saying and getting you to have your experience of what you're sharing.
Yeah.
And that really makes a big difference. Then the next thing is when it comes time to respond, come from a place of love and compassion and not from a reaction. And ask clarifying questions. If your feelings are a little hurt, say, you know, I need to clarify something here because I'm feeling a little hurt or I'm feeling a little angry, whatever it is. And I just need to understand a little bit better what you meant by, and ask questions and ask for help understanding and really hearing the other person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's important to, when listening to, because you're listening to understand, to, you might come up with a realization of like, oh, I didn't realize that you had felt this way because you sat there and listened instead of trying to respond. And then it's also, oh, I didn't realize that you felt that way. If you feel that way again, can you please let me know next time? So you could also do something like that if they mentioned that you said something to them that really upset them. You're like, oh, I didn't mean that to happen at all, you know? And then just, if that comes up again, or if I do something like, say something like that doesn't say, please let me know right then and there. So I'm like, oh, so I can change, you know, what I said, or make sure I don't say something like that again. So a lot of what can happen is that people like to stew. Something will be said to them, or something is done and it's upsetting or it frustrates them or whatever. And most of the time people don't say anything about it. And so they end up just sitting there and stewing, which means when they do end up talking to someone else, what can happen is that even their explanation of what's going on for them could actually come from more of a place of frustration or anger, because they just sat with it in themselves for a while. And so what that can also happen is then with the other person, it's like, then they're like, oh, you've been upset at me for like this long and you didn't say anything, which can also frustrate the other person. So it's important that if you are feeling upset, to try and communicate that as quickly as you can after you've understood what caused you to get frustrated or angry or upset or whatever it may be, to be able to come to that person and be, hey, I just wanted to let you know. You don't have to like go into a long explanation of just, hey, I wanted to let you know that this was kind of upsetting to me. Could you maybe not do that again? And like something like that, so that the other person can know. Because the longer you wait to say something like that, the more then it's like, because your behavior will probably change around that person, and then the person will start to notice, and then they'll go in a spiral of thinking, because if you don't communicate, really everything comes down again to just communicating. But that's the other thing, is that you also don't want to make sure, you want to make sure that you're not stewing on this problem for a while, because the more you stew, the other small things will start adding to the pot. And so it may be at a point when you do like want to talk to someone, that there's other things that you're frustrated about that are also coming into the conversation as well.
Yeah,
so
totally. And that reminds me of one of the other points we wanted to make about timing.
Yeah.
That, being able to be sure that the timing of an important conversation is such that the other person has the wherewithal to really be present and listen, and you have the wherewithal to be totally focused. Sometimes in my career, I've done sales calls, and these are really deep transformational calls that I do with people, and helping them see whether or not the company I'm representing is going to have the solution for what they need. And sometimes people would take the call while they were driving, or while they were, taking care of their kids or whatever. And I'd say, we need to reschedule, because clearly you don't have the ability to be present in the way you need to be for this kind of conversation. Same thing in coaching calls I've done. People would, and it would be a planned drive. Oh yeah, I'll talk to you then because I'll be driving. No, we're not going to do your coaching call while you're driving in traffic. That's not the way this works. And that doesn't give you the ability to give me the focus and attention to share where you're coming from. And it doesn't give me the ability to feel like I've got your attention and can really go deep with the things we need to go deep about. And so that's one of the things. The other is, if you feel like there's something important to talk about, like you've been stewing about it and all of that, don't bring it up right before bed, unless that's how you process in your relationship. Some people do that. They process whatever needs to be processed in the relationship before they go to sleep. But if it's not the way you normally process, don't do that. Don't do it as you're walking out the door. And don't leave like little hints, like, we need to have a talk. Because who doesn't go nuts with that kind of announcement?
I hate those. I hate that phrase. Anytime, no matter how someone says it, like, oh, we need to talk, I'm like, you can't just say, oh, we need to talk, because it's immediately like, oh, what's wrong? Like, if a reaction immediately happens with that, because the connotation of that phrase is just bad things are going to be said.
Exactly.
So,
and not everybody means to do that.
No.
They don't mean it to be bad news or even be a big problem. It's like, hey, can we talk tonight? Period. Then you're like, about what?
Yeah, you start thinking about it,
like,
and then...
Yeah, is there something wrong? Oh, no, I just want to talk about vacation next summer. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, so it's also good to like give a little bit, just explain a little of what you want to talk about, so then the other person isn't like, because that will happen.
Would tonight be a good night for us to talk about our summer plans? I was thinking after dinner, around 8:00 tonight, rather than watch a show, let's like have a focused conversation about what we want to do. And then if there is something that's deep that you want to talk about, that's a tricky one. I really encourage you to figure out a way to just spend some time together and figure out if it can like come out in an organic way, rather than say, I want to talk about the fact that you never listen to me and you're always leaving me alone, and I'm really unhappy. Well, that's not going to go very well. So being able to just spend some time together and first find some things that you appreciate about each other. And this is not just for romantic relationship. This is parent-child relationship. This is friend relationships. This is all kinds of things. And there's Abraham Hicks called it a rampage of appreciation that you can do in a relationship, where you just say as much as you can that you love about the other person before you deal with anything else. And often the other thing that's been such a big deal, it has less sting to it, both for you saying it and for the other person receiving it. So pay attention to the timing of things and figure out, a way to have those conversations. I know people who would have conversations in their relationship about money every single week. That's what they did on Saturday mornings. They looked at what they were spending, they looked what they were bringing in, and they adjusted for the following week. Are we on track for the saving we wanted to have? Are we on track for buying that car we wanted to buy next year? And that really worked for them to have a regular time to do that. There are people I know who get their kids up and dressed, and then they lay in bed naked together. And the kids that's their 30 minutes of TV. They don't get any other TV during the day, but they get that 30 minutes of the TV while the parents are just appreciating each other. It's not having sex. It's not that kind of stuff. It's just having time together that feels really vulnerable and connected. So the thing is, there's no one way to do any of these things, but pay attention to where you feel like in your relationships or in your relationships, whatever kind they are, you're just feeling like you're not having that time to have a deeper conversation. So there's a small group of friends I hang out with during the pandemic quarantining, and occasionally, even with that super small group of people, I will want to have some time just with individual people, because it's different. The dynamic is so different to have all your time always in a group. And so occasionally I like to have a little bit of alone time with various people to just feel like we have a different connection, and our connection deepens one-on-one, because intimacy is different in a small group than it is one-to-one.
Yeah, exactly. Like I have the same thing. Like when I was actually able to hang out with my friends before the pandemic, that it was a very different sort of dynamic with when all of us were together. And so I found that there were certain combinations where it was easier to sort of connect with my other friends if they weren't necessarily together, just because they bond over other things than the way that I bond with them, kind of deal. So it's just noticing that and being aware of it, and not being like upset by anything. It's just like, oh, that's how they bond with each other. Cool, I'll expect that this is sort of going to be how our dynamic is when I'm with them. And then when I'm not with the two of them together or the three of them together, and then instead I get to be with like one-on-one individually, that it's just a different sort of dynamic, and there's different things that we can talk about. But that's just because people are different, and how they want to connect are going to be different. So again, like along with the timing is also, have you had a conversation about whether or not your friend wants to be or your partner, whatever, wants to have more of that intimate, deeper conversations? Because if you want to dive deeper and the other person doesn't, then that's kind of like, okay, well maybe then you need to reevaluate your relationship.
Well, or maybe you just need to respect where they are.
Exactly.
When my mom was dying, I really wanted to have those deep conversations about end of life, and we knew it was end of life, and she didn't want to have them with me. She would have them with my minister, but she didn't want to have them with me.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's it was interesting because she had come to live with me for her last year of her life, and I remember feeling like I really wanted to have more of those conversations. I had a few, especially in the later days, but I was thinking she wasn't having them, and the minister said, "Oh no, we're having them." Like, oh, okay, just not with me. And I had to accept that that's not where she was and what she wanted to do with me. Mm-hmm. And now having a child who's much older, I can totally appreciate not being able to hold it together, to have those conversations with you, to feel like I could, I think probably we would have those deep conversations, but I can appreciate how hard it would be to feel like I'm having those final conversations with somebody who's been in my life for their whole lives and who means that much to me in that way. So, so pay attention to, what people are available for, what they have the capacity for, and what they have the interest in. And as we've said before, certain friend groups we have are just very light, bantery, kind of fun relationships, and others have both, and others are just deep, intense conversations. And I like it all. What I had to learn was not to try to get everything from everybody. Mm-hmm. Some of the deep people, they're not as light and fun and frivolous in the way they relate. And that's okay. I don't need them to be different than they are. They like themselves that way, and they certainly bring something to my life in that way.
Yeah.
So I think there were just a couple more things we wanted to talk about. One was really being clear when somebody just needs to vent.
Yes, because that can be confusing if someone, because with venting, a lot of the time, some people, like, a lot of the times advice will usually follow a venting because venting often means complaining, you're just sort of, you're wanting to unleash some happy feelings and thoughts, right? That's generally what venting means, because you're frustrated by something and you just want to let it all out. But it's also important that sometimes people just solely just want to unload. And like, it's important, and this also goes back to timing, because it's important to clarify if you want advice after you unload, or if the other person can handle your unload, because maybe they're just like, I don't have the capacity for that right now. Like, I've also had a very stressful day, or like, I don't have the wherewithal to sort of like listen to you in the way that you need someone to listen, and just to nod and be like, oh man, that sucks, bro. That kind of deal.
Yeah.
So timing is important with that, and also just check in, and see if like, can I vent? And if someone wants to vent to you, be like, also check in. Do you want any advice, or you just want me to listen to you?
Yeah, exactly. And I love what you just said about checking with the other person to see if they're available for it, and rather than just vomiting on them. I certainly have had that happen many times in my life. I have this openness that I'll be sitting places and people will just tell me their life story. Strangers that I've never met before. And I had to learn to turn off some of that if I didn't want to have that, to receive that, because people don't have a good trigger, control of their trigger to share in some cases. So that's one of the things I invite you to like check in, like with yourself. Do you have the capacity to listen if somebody wants to do that, without giving them advice if they don't want it? And pay attention to how often you're unloading about the same topic over and over again without making any changes. And I've had friends like that I had to limit the time I could spend with them, and people that I really been very close to and really enjoyed, but every single time we were together, they were just venting without asking if it was worked for me. But sometimes with certain people, you would think they weren't going to take a breath, because they were afraid if they took a breath, then maybe I would ask a question or I might say something and they would have to stop venting. But it would be about the same exact thing every single time. And they would make a decision, supposedly during the time they were venting. Okay, thanks for listening. I'm going to do this. And then the next time it would be the exact same thing. So pay attention to yourself. If you're doing that, pay attention to what you're resisting. Are you resisting making a decision? Are you resisting improving your life? Mm-hmm. Are you resisting being happier? If you are constantly venting about the same thing, check in and see what it is that you need. Are you feeling like you are unsupported? Really get clear on what it is that is going on for you.
Yeah.
Then the final thing we were just going to talk just a minute about is patience.
Yes. So patience with other people, patience with yourself. And because it relates to sometimes people might need some more time to like work out what they need to say or what they want to say or what they're feeling, and that how the time that they need may be different from the time that you need. So you may be ready to have that conversation about like whatever needs to happen, and then they're like, no, I'm still not ready. And so you're like, but I am, like, I want to talk about it now. And they're like, no, I still need some more time. So it's like a sense of patience of being able to, come together when you're both ready to. Also within a conversation as well, of letting someone work through what they need to say, even if it takes a little while. Because some people need more time to work through what they're feeling or what they want to say, like as they're saying it. And so they could take longer than you, who maybe like thinks everything in your head. And so you're like, I know what I'm going to say, like right now. So there's just like it's good to have patience when dealing with other people and wanting to speak with other people, because everyone is going to come at the conversation differently. Their timeline for when they're ready to have a conversation is going to be different. The time it takes for them to get to a certain level in a relationship is going to be different. So it's really good to just sort of feel out where, again, communicate, ask questions about where they are and where they sort of see that their timeline is, so that you both have an understanding of where you're at, so that you're not feeling impatient or trying to push someone to go somewhere, or move things faster than they want to, be moving.
Yeah, and remember, people have short attention spans for the most part. You know, especially in American culture, we've gone down to what, a 10 or 20-second attention span. Like, you got to capture us or we're not going to keep listening. So pay attention to where you are not being patient, and lengthening your attention span so you can be present and listen. And if you are feeling like the other person doesn't have the time or the capacity to listen to you, why are you trying to get your needs met by that person? Yeah. Is it something that has to be worked out in that relationship? Is it possible to work it out in that relationship? Or is it something that you need to let go of and acknowledge who they are? I have friends that I love, and they are not the people I'm having deep conversations with. I really enjoy them. I have a really great time with them, but I'm just not going to that deep place because that's not their comfort zone. Yeah. And I'm okay accepting where people are, because what we've always talked about is you've got to have a strong inside of you, and you have to have a strong internal reserve, so you're not trying to get your needs met by other people. And so for me, I'm always working on strengthening my reserve and strengthening my own self-love and confidence and presence and ability to connect without trying to get something from other people. Now, that said, I am not going to have in my inner circle people who don't have the capacity to listen and to be present. And in a little bit outer circle, those people are great. But in that inner circle, I don't want to hang around a whole lot with people who don't have that capacity to be deeply connected and listen when that's appropriate, and who hear me when I say I don't feel heard, and are willing to say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Let's go back and fix that. And I just want to give that caveat one more time. If you're the person who's always creating a drama, if you're the person who's always got to have everybody else, listening to your venting, and your venting never changes, pay attention to that too. Because that is not going to take you to a happy life, and it's not going to take you to happy relationships.
Yeah, no, your relationships aren't going to be connected because of the fact that you're not connecting. Like, right. Venting is not connection.
Yeah.
That's another thing. Venting is not connecting. All you're doing is word vomiting. That's it. It's just straight up word vomit. And you're not going to build deeper relationships. You're not going to build long-lasting relationships if all you're doing is venting at other people. That's also not a conversation. Word vomiting is not a conversation. So if you really want to connect with people, you have to work on your conversation skills. You got to work on your communication skills. You don't want to always talk about the same thing with one person all the time. There's a movie that we just watched recently where one scene was like, one of the characters was like talking to the main character, like, oh, I'm glad we finally talked about something other than this one thing that we always talk about. And the main character's like, what? You want to talk about something else? So, like, there's the other thing is, like, people may not, like, you may bond over one thing, but you can also talk about other things. Yeah. It's not just regulated to that one thing and that's all you can talk about. People are three-dimensional beings. We're all three-dimensional beings, right? There's different layers to us. So.
Yeah. So just a little recap. Pay attention to whether you're the interruptor or the interruptee. Like, really pay attention to it, mm-hmm. and ask for what you want to correct it. And pay attention to listening to understand and hear what the other person's saying. Yeah. Not to respond to them in that moment. Later, when it's appropriate to respond, come from a place of self-responsibility and respond, don't react to what they've said. And check in with yourself about any feelings you have coming up of reaction. Mm-hmm. Where you feel like, that's really making me mad, or that's really hurting my feelings. Pay attention. That's something inside of you. And have patience. People have short attention spans. Make sure that you're paying attention to what is really going on in the moment. And your timing is a big part of that.
Yeah.
And so make sure that you're making time to have a conversation. You're not springing something on someone without any kind of context and atmosphere where it's going to be able to be received. And whether you're venting or listening to somebody venting, pay attention to how often you're doing that, mm-hmm. and not changing anything.
Yeah.
And there might be another way to deal with this. If all you can do is vent about it, there might be something else you need to work on.
Yeah.
So, until the next time, yes. We love you.
Mwah. you.